Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Um, Thank you for joining us. I had thought last week that that was the last one of the year, but I was wrong. Um, I'm joined again by my colleague Rory. Rory, what have you been wrong about lately?
What have I been right about? Oh God, I can't think. So many things come to mind, but looking forward to in fact, not looking forward to the end of seminars or the open days rather, and glad to get this extra one. Not sure if you can hear me. Hello.
Hopefully, I'm wrong about my hopes for the football this evening. Um, oh yeah, what quarter final? Um, very big deal. Anyway, we'll be today a little bit about how, as an organisation, we think about applying to study at Oxford and Cambridge. Uh, Sort of give us a for what we do. So, I guess to start off, to introduce myself, my name is Matt. I look after the research side of the organisation here at UniAdmissions. So my job is to make sure that all the things we put out there in this presentation, on the website, elsewhere, that all those things are backed up by facts, real things that we can point to in a nice big spreadsheet, and they all have nice R squared values, that sort of thing. And what do you do? What do you do? Why are you here?
So my name's Rory. I'm one of the admissions consultants at UniAdmissions. So I talk to students and parents and work out which program best suits them for applying to Oxbridge or medical schools. So you might have tried to arrange a consultation, or if you do, you'll have it with me or one of my colleagues, and we'll have a little chat and work out how we can support you with your application, basically.
Love. So to get on with things today, the first thing to, I think, understand about the approach we take as an organisation, that we really focus on data and measurable actionable evidence. So the first part of that thing of football context is to understand the situation with A levels at the moment. So although things have now largely gone back to normal, the rate at which young people are getting the absolute top A-level grades is still much higher than it was prior to the pandemic. And that goes for A-levels, but also for CSEs. Now, what this means is that if you're in the position of the admissions tutors, this makes your job much harder when it comes to selecting between the students. As I like to do here, I've got an abstract example, but if you're trying to determine which of your large number of eggs are the best quality eggs, you want a metric that helpfully delineates which ones are not just the best, just the top half and the bottom half, but also which ones are in the top 10 and which ones are in the top 5. Now, at the moment, A-levels aren't very good at doing that. Roy's looking entirely perplexed by this setup. A-levels
I'm trying to think, because I'm sure you'll ask me in a moment. sorry, go on.
Yeah, at the moment, don't do a job of this because so many people are getting the top A-level results, it becomes very hard to differentiate between students. Sorry, I appear to be having a technical problem. Is it working? Okay. Can you still see the presentation, Rory?
I can, but the reception's not been great. I've been having some technical issues. I don't know about you. You've been cutting in and out a bit.
Oh, that's not good, is it? Well, let's solve. I'll flick my video off for a little while and see if that helps. So as I was saying, the way that the aims work and which students getting high grades makes it much harder to differentiate between which students are the very best and which students are merely very good. So what a university is to have some kind of way of telling the difference between not just the students who are in the top half and the top quarter, but which students are in the top quarter and the top 10, the top 5, really getting down to the detail of these things. What this means for you in practice, Oxford and Cambridge, your exam scores aren't the most important thing to be focusing on, because the exam scores have what we could call relatively weak predictability. The other parts of your application really come into play, and we'll be talking about those in a second. When we spend time at the data on these questions, what we see is that your GCSEs, your A-levels, they really only count for maybe 25–30% of your chance of getting a place at the university you're applying to, and that things like admissions tests, the reference you get from your teacher, make a much bigger difference than you might expect. And the way we tend to conceptualize this, and this is why I'm going to punish Rory for a moment, is with a pie chart.
Of course, yes. So at UniAdmissions, we have our sort of the pie chart, which, sorry, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to take over or not. I just kind of assumed.
That's always the cue.
Right. So yes. So as you can see, your exam grades are about 25–30%, and your sort of personal statement and your extracurriculars and things like that. That's everything else. That's 15% ish. But the most important two parts of your application are your interview and your admission test score, as you can see. So the key thing is, because lots of people have very good grades, lots of people have, 3 A stars predicted, lots of people have, all 9s at GCSE. The average Oxbridge applicant last year, I think, had 8 9s or something at GCSE. So that's where you really differentiate yourself, is in the admissions test and the interview.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. It always feels like you're asking me to do a maths test, but if they've got 8 9s, I'm thinking, yeah. I think that's 2, but I'm not. The other thing to bear in mind here, when we're thinking about the Oxbridge process, is rate of these subjects have become more competitive across the last few years. This is almost entirely driven by the number of places available. Simply put, more students, and the number of places available has not grown as quickly. The number of places available at Oxford is basically unchanged since 2016, but the number of people applying has gone from fewer than 20,000 to very close to 25,000. So we're looking at something close to a 25% increase in the number of students applying, but really very little increase at all in terms of the number of places available. We say the same slightly, but to an almost greater extent, actually, with Cambridge, where at one point Cambridge was getting maybe 16–17,000 applications a year, and that's now to 24,000. So that's growth of maybe 28, 29, maybe even 30% over the same time period. What we do see with Cambridge, we see a slightly quicker increase in the number of places available, but still really not a massive change. We're still not close to being, as you can see from the graph, still not close to being at a point where the places are catching up with the demand from students. To look at this in a slightly tidier way, you can see that your chance of getting in to Oxford and Cambridge dropped from 25 and 20% right down to below 20% and below 15%. We don't have the new data from this past year just yet, but I would say that's a pretty solid looking trend line. I don't know if you disagree. I don't think we're going to be expecting anything different to happen in the near future.
No, I mean, it's, obviously more people applying for basically the same amount of places. It's, I think this is the most competitive year, or last year, as you can see, was the most competitive year so far, and I'm sure it'll be the same this year. So it's a case of, getting as much preparation in as possible, and, setting yourself apart from the other, hundreds of people who are going for the same one place that you're applying for.
Yeah. I haven't taken the time to sort of pull it out, but presumably at some point in the future at this rate, no one will get in.
That seems to be how it's going, yeah.
We'll get into some kind of lower bound problem, which will be exciting. Another here is that although the admissions, your chance of getting in have gone down in these raw terms, the real difference comes when you look at the different subjects. So the most difficult subject to get into at Cambridge is computer science, with just under 10% who apply. Computer science used to be a fair bit less competitive, but people they've just got really into computers lately. It's really computers of late, people are. If you ask me, they're too interested in computers. Meanwhile, Romans and Greeks up at the other end of the sea have remained stubbornly unpopular. And so if you're applying for classics at Cambridge, you have better than even's chance of getting in, which is a pretty good. And you can see as you sort of move down this graph that there is a huge gap, up to just over 50 percentage points between the hardest to get into and the easiest to get into subject. We didn't say classics is easy to get into, but I'd certainly fancy my chances more at that than at computer science, not least because I'm rubbish with computer. So the thing to bear in mind here when you're planning your application, this is something we've used on as an organizer, is to take this information into account. The competitiveness of the subject you're applying for, there can be huge variation. One example I like to pull out is that at Oxford, students who are applying to study biochemistry get in 16% of the time, people who are studying classic chemistry get in 35% of the time. That's a huge difference. You can more than double your chances by just chopping off that bio at the beginning. Do we know what I'm sure it's a very important difference. Do we know why people are so, not keener on chemistry, Rory, or is bio just really trendy at the moment? What's going on there, do you think?
I wish I had a sort of a solid answer. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of haven't heard of, well, they might have heard of biochemistry, but obviously that's not offered at school. It's sort of a combination of this new thing, and a bit like philosophy and subjects like that. But I haven't noticed anything particular in the students applying to either, or no sort of rhyme or reason. But I'm sure there is one.
Yeah. Well, if you know the answer, please write in, because this has been puzzling me now. I wouldn't want to study either of them, but no one wants to study chemistry, it would be. The other thing to bear in mind are some of the really subtler effects. So an easy example of this is that you are roughly twice as likely to get into medical school at Cambridge than you are at Oxford. Now, you might think is the course at Cambridge not as good? Do few people want to go there for one reason or another? Does it have a worse reputation? No. So the difference is Cambridge trains roughly twice as many doctors a year as Oxford does. They just do more people, and so there is greater supply, and yet the demand is fairly similar. So if you're thinking of applying to Oxford or Cambridge for medicine, you have a better chance of getting in at Cambridge simply because they have more places, and people have not noticed this yet, which is a mystery to me, but such is life, I suppose.
I mean, I think it's probably also something to do with, they offer, I think, 85% of their 85 to 90% of applicants an interview. So that they keep the funnel much wider, much later than Oxford. It's much harder getting an interview at Oxford as well. So that's something to bear in mind too. So you can be tactical with your decision. Obviously, that probably should be the only thing to guide your decision, how competitive it is. But definitely you should bear it in mind.
Yeah. So, moving on, if we think about the sort of skills beyond, we've talked about kind of the strategy you might want to approach this with, but what are the kind of the skills and things you want to be developing, from now through until that application time? I think the interviews finish end of next week, so it's a little late to change things now if you're applying for this year. The first I'd like to emphasize is that personal statements are really overrated. They count for less than the reference that your teacher at school gives you, and we have that officially in writing from one of the Oxford what they call admissions manuals. The other thing about the personal statement is, because it's a page of writing, you can spend forever on it if you want to. You could spend an hour shuffling around your commas and deciding whether to say very or quite. There are so many opportunities with the personal statement to essentially just pour time into it, rather than focusing on other parts of the application, whether that's your revision for your A-levels, whether that's the admissions test, whatever it is. The next thing to say is you will probably, if you are an ambitious student, look around online and you'll see lots of examples of marvelous, fantastic personal statements people have written to get into top universities. And you'll think, what a brilliant personal statement. This must have been a really important part of the application. Probably not. Probably the people who are very good and get in are the kind of people who write good personal statements. Also, kind of people who post their personal line, those people are show-offs. They put loads of time and energy and thought into that personal statement, and they don't want to go that to go to waste. They want lots of people to imply them. So really don't worry about those people. You are just as likely to get in with a statement that is, good, but not spectacular, as you are with a spectacular one, because what really counts, and this is what we're going to talk about now, admissions test. Pretty much every subject at Oxford or Cambridge has an admissions test. So you've seen your UCAS application, there will, a couple of weeks later, there's a little bit of variation in timing, be a test. You can normally sit these at your school, or you can go to a Pearson Centre and do them there. There shouldn't be too much difficulty arranging them. And these tests will be specific to the subject you're applying to. And, going back to the emphasis that we like to put on data as an organisation, these have a huge impact on your chance of getting in, because we can see a really lovely big R-squared value, a really strong correlation between performance in these tests and comes when it's the application. So if we look here, this is the data for the Oxford MAT. It's maths. Good naming work from them there. And what you'll see is that we have a fairly nice class. We have lots of people applying, and those people applying, until they get into the sort of 45-50 range, essentially no one is interview being the white segment. I'm going to get my little pointer out, I think. We've got this local maximum occurring here at 100%. And what you see is we then, within that bell curve, the offers. And so we see that your chances of getting an interview are highly correlated with your test. And we also know that, this being Oxford, you don't get in without an interview. And we see that even once you've got the interview, there is still a very strong score in the test and your chance of getting a place. Now, fortunately, this goes for all of them. It isn't just the math. Similar shape for the TSA. This is the test for students applying to study PPE. We see a similar test. This test is a multiple choice, unlike the MAT. So you end up with a much more condensed curve. This is because on these multiple choice tests, it's quite hard to do really, really badly, because you're always going to get, number of question options over question. Essentially, there's a kind of flaw score you get by just guessing every answer with these. Now, what you'll see is that there is incredible clustering in the TSA, getting 3 points. If you've got that interview, you are pretty much odds on to get that place. And this is for a course where people, that score is putting you in a really great position. We see that in the language part of the TSA as well. Let me just And just to clarify that this goes for everything, we even see it in the test for students who are applying to study English here at Oxford again. And we see that the average applicant, the average interviewee, and the average offer holder, even though your performance on the exam isn't involved in your oh, I think we may have. Did you lose me for a moment there?
I lost you for a minute. I was just trying to, regain reception, as it were.
That. Sorry, I was just speaking about English. What did we miss?
I can't quite. I mean, I think you were just talking about how the score splits up, as it were. Can't quite recall.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just to sort of finish, this goes even for essay-based subjects. We see this here with Oxford, that even for a subject where there is no mathematical element to the admissions test, there's still this really admissions and outcomes, which is really helpful to know. And I think the way we think of it as an organisation is this is the really key thing to understand. Your GCSE grades, you've done them, probably. You might be coming to us before your GCSEs, but for most people who already done your GCSE, they're long. The A levels are coming up, but they come up after these tests. Those are important, but you want to get the offer first. What we is strongest predictor of getting an offer is being really good at these tests, and so we really emphasize being good at the tests. Now, it isn't just about the tests. I want to talk very briefly about interviews. The most common misunderstanding I find with interviews is people say, you can't really practice for the interviews. And I like to think of being a lot like having teams in football, something I'm hoping I won't have to think about later on today. People will tend to practice for the pressure, the intensity of a really difficult situation like a penalty shootout. Now, this is true. You can't replicate pressure in this, but what you can replicate is you can replicate, all the things that you are doing that aren't the outputs. Your technique. You can practice the calming techniques you're going to use to keep yourself relaxed and centered, and how to deal with adversity. You can practice how to respond to uncomfortable questions. You can practice all of those. You practice the interview itself. You can't practice that situation with that professor, but you can practice everything else about the situation. And that's the key part, preparing the interview. You're coming into these interviews as a young person. We're not expecting you, no one is expecting you fantastic. This is something that's unfamiliar. You probably haven't done it many times. That's what makes practice so important. It's the organization in the way that we prepare students. But the thing with interview practice is it is a lifelong, really soft skill about how you build relationships and rapport and communicate with other people. The longer in advance you can practice that, the better, because it's one of those things slow to grow. It's more like a tree than like a mushroom. It's not something that's going to pop up overnight. And I think what I'm going to do now is hand over to Rory to talk a little bit about the specific support we provide. Go ahead, Rory.
Absolutely, thanks very much. So at UniAdmissions, we've been supporting students with Oxbridge and medical applications for 10 years. And with our premium programs, they basically have 4 parts. So the 4 pillars really of our support, and the first one is one-to-one tuition. So we have a consultation, and then we arrange an expert tutor, which is subject and university specific if possible, and they would take you through all the content you need to know. Basically work on whatever areas you feel you need working on. For example, if you had an admissions test, they would prepare you for that, or if it was an interview, they would help with that, or your personal statement. And then we have our online resources, which is the second part of the program. and that's the student portal. So you'd get access to our student portal, which is the hub of the program, really. Again, where you'd learn all the content you need, you'd practice with question banks, and then do timed tests as well. You can also submit personal statement drafts and things on there, reading lists to explore the subject, and video series as well. So loads to go into in there. And then we also have our weekly enrichment seminars. So these are basically designed to replicate university study, and they take place every week. They're live, but they are recorded, and they're really interactive. So you have homework for each one and a handout as well. And they, again, it's good practice for the interview because you're practicing discussing the subject with other people studying it. And then finally, we have our intensive courses. So we have an intensive course for all the admissions tests, for the interview, and also for your personal statement too. And these are, placed close to each application hurdle to give you that sort of final boost of confidence, and to sort of consolidate all the work you've done with your tutor and in your own time as well. And this is group work, so it's in your small groups, all online, all over Zoom, and just gives you a really good final boost of confidence going into the real thing. So it's a structured program of support, which can take you from the beginning right through to the end, and it's what we do best. So yeah, do get in touch, go on the website and have a little look.
Fab. Thanks, Rory. We're pleased to say that we're optimistic we'll get our 500th ever offer in the coming weeks and months. But we do have a track record that we're really proud of over the past several years of really helping students to achieve their goals. And those numbers compare really favourably with even some of the fancier schools in the country. As a Christmas treat, I'm not going to do the joke, Rory. I'm going to let you off. If you've enjoyed this webinar, please do drop us a review on Trustpilot. If you drop in a review saying how good the webinars are, I will add it to the future webinars. Bonus points to anyone who mentions how handsome and charming I am, although since the video isn't working very well today, I think probably that wouldn't be an entirely honest review, so I wouldn't worry about it. If you've enjoyed listening to me, you can also listen to my colleagues Rohan and Will. They have a podcast called the Two Blues Podcast. It covers everything from the admissions as we've talked about, through to some more fun things. They have an episode on the zombie apocalypse, which terrified, so I haven't listened to it again. And so what we'll do now is for a few minutes, we will take some questions, and then I have to run away, prepare myself for several hours before the England match at 7 o'clock. Very stressful day for me. Rory, who does not care for football, very...
I wouldn't say I don't care for football. I'm very excited for the game this evening. Going to be heading out to watch it. Very exciting. I think I've lost sound. I can't hear you, Matt, I'm afraid.
Oh, hopefully I'm back. Sorry about that. We've not had a good day with the broadband today, have we?
No. I can now hear you again, but yes.
Oh, fab. We've got one question has come in from Akeem, asking about the value of work experience. So the thing to bear in mind about the process here is that Oxford and Cambridge are interested in your academic ability specifically. More complicated for applying for medicine, where it is really helpful to have the work experience. But even then, it's about what the work experience has done. Learn, what have you experienced, what ideas has it given you, what has it changed about your outlook. When you application, you need to be focusing on how it has made you a better candidate, not on saying that the organization that you worked for liked you or that you enjoyed the work. Those are all great, and in 3 or 4 years' time when you're looking for a job, those are all really good things to have. But in the short term, you're showing that the work experience you've had enhances you as an academic prospect for the university, not to say you should take me as photography because one day I'm going to be an excellent accountant. That isn't a very good argument for studying geography. It's a good argument for studying geography, becoming an accountant instead. Not there's anything wrong with being an accountant, but it's not the set of qualities that the universities are looking for. They're not outsource their admissions process to other organizations based on their recommendations. It's about using that experience to make yourself a better candidate for. Do you have anything to add there, Rory?
I mean, not massively. I think you more or less covered it, but yeah, you're right. It's about not saying look at me and how fantastic I am and I've done this and they really liked me. It's and again with playing sports, captain of the lacrosse team or whatever it is, playing the violin, it's great. But ultimately it'll come down to your performance. I mean, your grades obviously, but then your performance in the admissions test and the interview. And it might be something to talk about in the interview. They might bring it up, and in which case that's great. But yeah, it's not about where you've been and who you know. It's what you're like and how you think as a student. So yeah.
Fab. Thanks, Rory. I think, mostly in deference to how unhappy the computer is, we'll call it there. It's not happy today. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. I think we'll be back next week after this bonus extra episode. And we'll see you in the new year when we will be, hopefully, a lot more coherent, and I will have fixed whatever it is that has gone wrong with the broadband today. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. And of course, it's Canberra, is it not?
It's what, sorry?
It's coming home.
It absolutely is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.